This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and we have a great guest tonight. You know, it's funny. I met this guy years ago. It was at an old comedy club called it was at Brown Thompson. It was in Hartford. I think it was the Last Laugh in Hartford. And we worked together. And after the show, we were at the bar, and I still remember this. He turned me onto a beer called Anchorstein. And it's funny because they no longer have that beer. It stopped being made in 2023. But since then, he's gone on to be an Emmy winner. He's an amazing photographer. In fact, the headshot I use on Link, he took of me in studio in Burbank during my show Cooper Talk, and he has a show on PBS, and I'm really interested to hear about because I saw the little snippet he sent me, and I had Phil Rosenthal in it. It had Ray Romano, and I think it was Allison Janney. I'm not sure she would turn sideways, but my guess is Tom Caltabino. How you doing, Tom?
I'm good, Steve. Good to see you outside of the bar.
Now tell me about Mr. Clown, because it's just, I know of you as a sitcom writer, I know you as a comic, and it just seems like a different thing, but and I saw the videos, but tell me all about this.
Yeah, it's a departure. So you and I met doing stand-up. I did stand-up for years. I met Ray Romano. I ended up working on Everett Raymond. And that entire time, since when I met you, I had a puppet like a Muppet, okay? But if you're a normal guy and you want to meet girls, you don't tell them that you have a clown puppet. Okay. That should never be mentioned. But it's something that naturally came to me. I've always done it. When I first started doing gigs, you know, I did this bad thing, Steve. You know what it's like when you're just trying not to die. Please don't bomb. I used to do a thing with a stuffed animal where I'd say, okay, either you guys laugh at my jokes or I hang the reindeer gets it. It was a little stuffed animal. So I always had that natural affinity for puppets, but you know, I have video of me in Ray Romano's living room before Everybody Loves Raymond, entertaining his twin boys and blonde daughter that became the show. And if you watch Everybody Loves Raymond, there's pictures of my character on the refrigerator, and in one of the episodes, Ray Romano is putting into the mouth of my puppet to start the show. Okay. But it's very innocuous. So long story short, I would always naturally do it, entertain my friends' kids, and I never gave another thought really. And then I haven't talked to you in a while. And as you know, Hollywood can be a weird place, and you end up in weird places. So I ended up doing a food show in Korea with Heather Graham and Hugh Jackman. Okay, if that's not a left turn. So,
what did you do for the show? What was the whole scenario? What did you do? Were you the writer? Were you the producer? Were you the creator, director? What did you do?
So Phil Rosenthal was trying to do a food show, which now is Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix. Okay, if you watch, I think he's going into season 8, is getting released in June. It's a really big hit. He sells out live shows internationally. He just did a tour of Europe. Okay, before then, he introduced me to a producer because he was trying to do a pilot. And I met that producer at the Montreal Comedy Festival. And that producer asked me to come along and help write for this upcoming show. And I said, I can't because I'm pitching sitcoms in the fall, and that's when you want to go. I said, thanks. I would love to go to Korea and do that food show and just write. And, you know, I usually mention I'm a photographer, so all the photography options. Smash cut to, the trip gets delayed to November. The North Koreans shoot a missile at South Korea. One of the people on the crew, their family won't let them go to Korea. So now the producer calls me and goes, Tom, you're expendable. Would you mind going to Korea? And I said, sure. And so he said, meet Heather Graham tomorrow at LAX, the day after Thanksgiving, and fly to Korea, and we'll shoot the show for a week, and you can help write lines, you can take pictures, which I did. And subsequently, my photos ended up in the book called Kimchi Chronicles. And I would help, you know, what I did on Raymond very much at times, which is try and think of funny things or funny angles on the fly. So then at the same time, I become friends with one of the producers. He is back in New York after shooting in Korea. And also a friend of mine had a daughter, and she said, if you ever come to New York with your clown puppet, I'd love for you to just come over. And so those events happen. I fly to New York. I do a show at her house, for her 5-year-old daughter. And it's Caroline Ray, who Caroline Ray, who was, and Hilda on Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And so after then, Steve, I have my clown puppet in a black Nike bag, and I'm going to meet the producer of the Kimchi Chronicles and his new girlfriend at a place called Whiskey Park on Central Park South, a sophisticated place. So I meet him. He goes, "What's in the black bag?" And I said, "Oh, a clown puppet." And he goes, "Oh, take out the clown puppet." So I go, "I'm not taking out the clown puppet at Whiskey Park." But later that night, we went back to his apartment and we were drinking. They drink a tremendous amount in Korea, by the way, Steve. I don't know if you even drink anymore, but I don't care what you were able to drink. Koreans drink that and they brag about it. So for the business success, if Steve Cooper goes out and doesn't get hammered, they would go, "Is Steve not a corporate player? What is wrong? Can somebody take Steve aside? He had 6 drinks. Why did he not have that many drinks?" And I'm not exaggerating. It's a sense of pride that you're allowed to let your guard down. And there's an Anthony Bourdain episode where he does that. He starts his show at the end where they are so drunk they can barely speak. So that's normal protocol. So we're drinking at this guy's apartment, and I take out now this clown puppet, and I'm speaking the Korean words I know. 2 months later, I'm back in LA and flying back to New York. I'm on the airplane with this guy and he goes, "Tom, that clown puppet, I can't stop thinking about it. It cracks me up when I watch the video." And I'm like, "What video?" He goes, "That night I videotaped it. I think he's really entertaining. I think we should do a food show." So I shoot a food pilot, right? And then with the clown for kids. And my friend, who you might know also, Margot Black, who did stand up in New York.
The name sounds familiar.
Okay. Long story short, this is the end of the story. I show her the video. She goes, "That's great. Can you teach something called sight words?" And I said, "I don't even know what sight words are." And she said, "That's because when we learned it, it was just words. But now they are framed as sight words. 100 basic words you have to know on sight as a child to get out of kindergarten." So I made videos. My house is a studio, by the way. I have a lighting grid and everything, and I make videos. I make videos of 100 videos with Mr. Clown doing sight words. Her son gets a perfect score. One of the producers from that show, the guy at Whiskey Park, says, "My friend works for Google. I think you should meet him." I meet him. He said, "I think there's a bigger play here." And that started me thinking, okay, rather than just entertaining Ray Romano's kids in his living room, maybe there's a bigger audience. And I'm not working on Ever's Raymond. I'm not encumbered by that show or having to take that big paycheck. So now I can go out on my own and try and make money, helping children. So that's kind of what led us to this point. And then long story short, we sold a show to PBS. We just finished filming it. It's called Hello, Hi, How Are You? And it does guest, Ray Romano and Allison Janney and Phil Rosenthal, Maurice LaMarche, who's a big voiceover guy, et cetera. And I'm Mr. Clown, the main character. So that's kind of brings it full. So for you, knowing Tom Caltabino as just another schmuck stand-up who you have to spend a weekend with in Connecticut at the Last Laugh, it would not, there's a disconnect there, I think.
Well, no, it's funny, because you sent me the video, and I think I talked to you a while back, because I think we had talked about blood pressure.
Yes.
Called me. We had talked about high, which I have to go to the doctor because my insurance where I was going, they no longer take it. So I haven't taken my blood pressure in 2 months, and my blood pressure is high because my prescription ran out. So I have to go. I'm going this Friday because I noticed my head's getting a little crazy. But I think we talked about that. But at that time, I think it was when you were working. You said you were working on a kids show at that time. This was maybe 5 years ago. It might have been before the pandemic. So as you said, it's been going for a long time. So now we know the sight words, but what is the show now? What is the total? What are you teaching kids? Because you also sent me something where there's there's Zoom and there's all these kids in a Zoom room. I mean, I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah. So what happened was because of so I, after that Whiskey Park thing, Caroline Ray said to me, if you can do a live show, we can go to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival because I'm performing stand-up at night and we can do a show for kids. And her daughter was going to be with her. So we assembled a 1-hour show, right? And then we slowly started making videos. When COVID hit, I saw the opportunity to visit kids with Zoom. As a puppeteer, Zoom is your friend because you can hide you, right? So I could all of a sudden Zoom with 500 kids as Mr. Clown. And it's not like me going to a classroom where you see Tom, the human being. So what happened is because kids became used to doing Zoom, I was able to reach out to classrooms around the country and do thousands of shows. And so I became very, very good at what worked for children by doing so many shows. It's like, the thought of substitute teaching is horrifying. Even if you're a stand-up comedian who's going, put me up in Cherry Hill, I don't care. Scarpati gig. This is inside baseball, folks. I'm not afraid of anything. Now go in front of 46-year-olds and try and keep their attention. Are you kidding me? I don't even know how. I can't. Where are you from? You can't do any of that. So what I learned during COVID was what children respond to in this learning environment, keeping them engaged. And so getting that feedback. And I used all that when we made the show. I'm like, okay, I had started making a show or writing a show earlier on and before COVID. And what we wrote, and I have some very talented people working with me, what we wrote 5 years ago was much different than after my experience with the Zoom, for 4 years during COVID. So much more children relatable. And I think the problem that a lot of people have, like, they did an Elmo talk show and it just felt like Jimmy Fallon, but instead of Jimmy Fallon, Elmo was sitting there. And I'm like, entertaining, but I don't know that children are going to find it entertaining. So we go as zany as a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old can think while teaching them the basic alphabet and, some sight words, etc. So, and it's all imagination,
What's funny about the kids shows, because as I said, I sub a few days a week, and the little kids love this show called Danny Go. And Danny Go is this guy who was a musician, and it's a band, and it's him, and he's got like a pilot, old school pilot hat on, and a dude dressed like a bear, and they run and they do this stuff, and these kids go crazy. And it's funny because it's what catches a kid's attention. It's amazing because you don't know, because times have changed since we were kids. We saw Gumby, we're like, holy fuck, what is Gumby? Or like Davy and Goliath, like, okay, Davy, oh, that's so different. Because claymation wasn't around. But now kids see so much stuff that I think like your show with the clown, like Danny Go, because he's real. I think it's not overly produced where the kids sit there and watch, Dog Man or Dog Cop or whatever it's called, and all these things. And it's produced. I think it's just something that I think kids want to go retro. They want to see stuff like a clown. They want to see a clown.
Well, it's funny because I make the joke, but there's a lot of anti-clown sentiment out there. And so I have no affinity for clowns. But I describe it to people as, think of a snowman with a red nose. It's a cute, he's a cute guy. And so because we do have that pushback initially, I'm like, not from children, but from adults who have seen it and who are like, oh, kids are scared of clowns. It's like, they're really not, and especially but I think it's anything, you don't know what's going to hit with a child. I just know that their imagination is so much more vivid and so much more fluid. As we grow as adults, it's like the pressure of the world and this and financial this and worried about death and every, you know what I mean? It's like the pure joy of a child, especially 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. Oh my gosh, they're just, it's just so full of joy. And we get tied by linear thoughts. Well, how, especially, writing on Evers Raymond, you're like, okay, how do we get from A to B, scene A to scene B? It's like with a kid, it's just like, now the skunk is on the roof and now he's dropping bananas on us and now we're under the ground. And now, you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, okay, well, you can't really do that. Well, I guess you can, you know what I mean? And so
No, it's funny. You just talked about Raymond, and something popped in my head because you said you told the story about Korea and all that. But now I just want to get real quick with Raymond. When you wrote on Raymond, I know Scrovan went to, I believe, India. Didn't you go somewhere? Because didn't Phil like franchise the show out? Didn't you do something like that?
Yes. So what you're referring to is Everest Raymond in I'm trying to get it not too inside baseball, but Sony International got the rights to Everest Raymond. They knew they had gold in the hard work. I'm not saying this because I am a writer. The bottleneck is the writing. So you can act out and film a show every week. You can't write a quality show every week. It would take us a year to write 24, killer episodes. Just like, when you're watching The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, you're like, what? 13 episodes? Now I got to wait a year to see another, you know what I mean? Like, it's not because of the shooting schedules, because of writing. So you have the ability to adapt the scripts that are written in America and cast a local cast. So you can shoot as fast as you can shoot. So Phil Rosenthal goes to Russia to make Everybody Loves Raymond. The movie is called Exporting Raymond. He made a documentary about it. And it's anybody that wants to get into show business, I highly recommend picking up Exporting Raymond, because what you are seeing is the odds and how hard it is to succeed. And the beauty of Exporting Raymond is this. You have a show that's won a bunch of Emmys. You have the guy that created the show. You have the guy that is the world expert on this show. And then he goes to Russia and they go, we don't think this show is funny and we don't think you know what you're doing. And so in Hollywood, that's what you're up against normally. Normally, you would go in and pitch and say, I have a great idea for a show. And they go, we don't think it's a good idea. And we think you're not very talented. There's the door. That's the normal Hollywood experience. And so Larry David went through it. They're like, we don't see you running the show, Larry. You don't have the experience. We're not going to let you run Seinfeld. And initially, for the first 6 episodes, he didn't. He was not the showrunner. Arguably, the greatest genius in sitcom writing history was not allowed to run a show. Okay. So, and I did happen to talk to the guy who was the showrunner, which is a worthwhile side note story, because Steve, do you know when you regret, I'm leaning into the mic. Do you know when you regret some decisions in your life?
Right.
Okay. Even us at our level, where you go, okay, we're not living in a cave. We can pretty much eat what we want, etc. But you do have regrets. And this gentleman was the showrunner, and he had points in Seinfeld. And at some point, they said, the producers, listen, would you like to sell all your points in Seinfeld? Because, and in his defense, the show was 6 episodes, Seinfeld, and then it got put on the back burner, and then a few more episodes, and then kind of put it on the back burner. And it really didn't hit until season 3. We look at it now, we go, the greatest sitcom of all time, a juggernaut. It went off the air at that point.
And it was called the Seinfeld Chronicles to start.
Yeah.
And it was changed because ABC had a show called the Marshall Chronicles. And somehow they thought the Marshall Chronicles would be bigger than the Seinfeld Chronicles. Yes. But I don't even know who was in the Marshall Chronicles.
Yes. So then that guy, they approach him. They say, would you like to sell your worthless points in Seinfeld? And he said, yeah, make me an offer. So they made him an offer, which now he would probably be making every month in interest on what those points are now worth, and sold his points. And by the way, when I spoke to that gentleman, because when I talked to him, I didn't know it was who I was talking to. I was halfway into a conversation with him and I go, oh, wait, this is the guy that I read about. His father he needed the money. His father wasn't doing well. The show didn't seem to be succeeding. Yeah, I'll take $200K that just dropped in my lap for a show that's going to get canceled. It's like selling Apple stock in 1990 and going, this is not going to be anything. It's going bankrupt. Anyway, so
how much would he be making? How much do you think he would be making a month off interest, off the money that he got from Seinfeld if he took those points and just kept them? What do you gander, Tom? What do you think?
I don't know if he would I don't know, maybe he would only have $100 million. So I don't know, because I think Larry David is worth $1 billion. I think Jerry might be worth $1 billion. I don't have to look that up because the money in a sitcom is syndication. So for every year, and I know Jerry, at one point Ray was the highest paid actor in the history of television because every single year you stay on a sitcom, it's a perpetual oil well. Every extra episode pays so much money in syndication, which is why when you turn on I Love Lucy and you go, wait a minute, this show was made in 1951 and people are still watching it and talking about it. Yes, they are. It's like, which brings me to another thing, but just to finish the exporting Raymond thing, on exporting Raymond, Phil goes in and he is tortured by the Russians. And you can see the process of adapting this show in another country where all the odds are against you, even though you're like, I know I have a hit show because we already did it. Like, I don't have to prove it, but you're showing me that it can't be done. You're telling me it can't be done. So what they did is the Sony adapted the show for as many countries as possible. They adapted in Poland, and it's too long of a story to tell, but I came in to adapt Rules of Engagement in Poland. Okay, so I went there after they did Everyone's Raymond in Poland. And in that, the briefest version of that story is the director had a nervous breakdown on live television when they were introducing Everyone's Raymond, the show. And he trashed the show. He said it was an unfunny show. And it was like a bad prostitute that needs new parts, and they sold me this bad prostitute, and I tried to make it into something. And if you think making a show with 4 cameras is easy, it's not. And the whole cast live on their version of the Today Show is looking at this director going, why is he trashing the show that we're here to promote? The show lasted like 5 episodes, and then it went away. And so a couple years later, my friend Tom Hertz, who you probably did stand up with from Connecticut, he had started Rules of Engagement, and he texted me, he said, do you want to go to Warsaw, Poland and do Rules of Engagement? And I thought he was making a joke because he used to make fun of Everyone's Raymond all the time because we were so precious. He's like, oh, it's like Shakespeare, what you guys are doing. It's amazing. Oh, Deborah burnt the toast. What an amazing scene. And so I went over to Poland and had the opposite experience that Phil Rosenthal had in exporting Raymond. The Polish people, as nice as could be. The adaptation went fantastic. No fighting. In Phil's movie, he gets shit from the head of wardrobe department. On Everyone's Raymond, on the structure, not that Phil was this person, but if the wardrobe department started yelling at the showrunner, that wardrobe person goes away because you can't yell at the boss. You don't, this person doesn't go into Warren Buffett and start screaming at him about parking spaces. You just don't do that. So for me, it was a delight in Poland. And so, but Everyone's Raymond was adapted in many, many places. Sometimes it succeeded, sometimes it didn't. But, it runs all over the world. And for example, in the UK, it's on all the time now. So the first run, the original one, they know our language. They've learned English over there. So they adapted.
So how did you go from being a stand-up at the Brown Thompson, the Last Laugh, to getting a job with Raymond? Because, it's funny now you look at it, and Scrovan was on a little while ago, and he said, he's pretty much priced himself out of the sitcom game. And you look at it now, there's like no sitcoms coming out. Like I saw like The Fall on was a CBS or NBC. There's like maybe 2, and it's different than then. But how did and that's such a hard job even back then to get. So what was your progression from being a stand-up to getting into a sitcom? And then you luckily, I'll be honest, like Lou Schneider says, he chooses between the Rhea Perlman show and Raymond, and he's like, thank God I picked Raymond because whatever happened to the Rhea Perlman show, it's on the shelf with Marshall Chronicles.
Yes.
So
yeah.
what tell me your path from stand up to Everyone Loves Raymond.
Yeah. So for me, it was, I met Ray. I'll tell you really succinctly. When I started doing stand-up, and I always wanted to do stand-up, and I read about a guy that won a comedy contest at the Tropicana in Atlantic City.
I was in that contest.
Okay. So I read just some guy, he won it, and his celebration was like a Coke in the median. And so then on the New Jersey Turnpike, driving home to Queens. So then I remember I entered the contest and I made it to the finals. And Jeff Lifschultz at the time, Jeff Ross, won. But I made it to the top 15. It was over 3 days, and then subsequently I met Raymond, and I was like, oh, I read about your big victory at the, which then it was an enormous thing, and the stand-ups, because did you do stand-up with Ray ever? Do you remember?
I never worked with Ray. I may have seen him go into the comedy works. I was more of a Comedy Factory outlet guy, but I never did stand up with him except for the contest, because he used to do the rubber band in his hair to close the show.
You were in the contest with Raymond that year.
Right, the one he won, and I made the finals. Okay. And I remember, but I was very new, and I got in the finals, and I got booked to be like a feature with the Fletchers, I think. And I don't think I even had 30 minutes. I went to Virginia. I think I had like 20 on a good night. But yeah, I was in that contest, and I think, there was a lot of, because it was close. We could just drive down. I mean, I was an hour from AC, 45 minutes. So I remember Ray winning, and I don't think I made the finals that year. I made it the next year, but everyone was saying, we think this guy's going to win. He does that bonsai thing with which he if you don't know, Raymond would tell a story, and somehow a rubber band would make his hair into the bonsai thing. But everyone thought that was like so different. Like, oh, how did he do it? And everyone were saying he would win, or was like someone else would win, and there's someone else who they thought would win. I didn't even think it was that funny. I think they even place. But
oh wow!
Anyway, so I never met Ray.
Wow, except for there. Yeah. So he, that's hysterical. On an episode of Raymond, it's in season 1, where he does an impression of, I want to say, sorry, an impression of a volcano or something, and it just goes and on his head. Yes. Highbrow humor. So I met Ray, I didn't know. I asked if you met him just because, back then everybody was on equal footing. So, I remember Brett Butler, working with Brett Butler, and Jon Stewart, like, it's just, everyone's a stand-up. There's no like, oh, here comes a star. And it's hard in hindsight to see that. But I worked with Ray. I saw Ray a lot in the clubs, but I had just started and he was already good. And so, but he needed somebody for his softball team. And a guy said, hey, Ray Romano needs somebody to play softball on his team. So I'm a really good softball player, and I was excited about that. And the guy that told me, I think, was like social climbing, because he was terrible at softball. And so I went, I met, I played on a team. We won 3 championships, and it was with his brother, who was a policeman, right, who lived across the street from Raymond in his parents' basement. And so that's how I initially bonded, and then it slowly progressed where Ray's like, hey, do you want to open for me at this club, whatever it is, at Rascals in West Orange? Okay. And then, do you want to open for me at the DC Improv? And for those of you people that don't know the stand-up world in those days, a lot of times you had something called a comedy condo. So all of a sudden, it's Tom with Steve Cooper, who's a weird dude, and this other guy who's obsessed, has a little cocaine problem, and all this stuff. So Ray liked I was a normal guy, I didn't do drugs or anything. And I was also single. So my material was about being single, and he was about being married. I was talking to Ray recently, and he was thinking about working with Paul. I mentioned Paul Reiser because he had to do a gig and he needed an opener, but a famous opener. And I go, what about Paul Reiser? And he goes, same material. It's all marriage material. He's like, it's not a good combo. So we became friends. Then Ray did a spot on Letterman. He got a development deal from Letterman, a development deal for people. They put money to a comedian and say, we'd like to develop a project around you. Here's $20,000. You're exclusively ours for 6 months. That happened to Ray. They found the writer, Phil Rosenthal. Phil Rosenthal wrote a brilliant pilot. Ray and I were at the Improv in DC. This is February 1996. And Ray's reading the script. And I have video of it, us driving back, from Washington, D.C., up Jersey to Queens, New York, no snow on the ground, February 13th, just terrible, bleak, that the winter will never end. About a day later, he calls me up, he goes, can you type? And I go, yeah, I can type, Ray. Why? I need to work on this pilot. I'm going to come over to your house and maybe we can work on it. And I had a computer too, a Mac computer, which was a big thing in 96, a Mac SE. And so we worked on that pilot, trying to do what ultimately became what we called in Everett Raymond Rayifying, putting things exactly in Ray's words, how voice, how he would say it. So we worked on the pilot, and then, and you're not allowed to do that. We realized you can't rewrite the pilot; it's taboo. So ultimately, we have to make suggestions, okay? Because Ray and I retyped the pilot, and we hand it to Stu Smiley, who's an executive producer on the show. He goes, "What's this?" We go, "Oh, we tweaked the pilot." He goes, "You cannot do that." And we're like, "We made it funnier. We made it in Ray's voice." And he's like, "This will cause a cataclysmic, gigantic explosion because you just can't do that." And Ray and I were just schmucks who were like, "Okay, like we'll write it in margins." Then, Ray went with Phil Rosenthal. I remember at the time, Steve, you'll love this. I was living with two other comedians, Brian McFadden, okay, and Mike Page, who we had all met at Main Street Comedy Cafe in Hackensack, New Jersey, okay? And I could barely afford $384 a month in rent in this house in Palisades Park, New Jersey, where we were living. And so, and I bounced my rent check because I was helping Ray. Ultimately, his wife got angry and she's like, "Stop spending so much time at Tom's house." So I had to go to Ray's house to write in his basement in Queens. And I got a speeding ticket after we finished the pilot, driving back to my house to bounce my rent check that day. Things were looking bleak. So the show gets picked up. You'll enjoy this. I'm in Philadelphia fighting in a jiu-jitsu tournament. And my pager goes off and it's Ray. And I go, "What's up, Ray?" He goes, "Hey, do you want to go to Hollywood and write on the show?" And I'm like, I don't want to leave all my wealth here, but I will. So it takes me about 14 minutes to pack up and move out to Los Angeles. Ray gets me a job. I get paid 3 out of 4 weeks and I make $400 a week for that job. And it's a BS title, meaning it's not in the Writers Guild. It's Ray forcing to have his guy on the show, which is not a good position. Phil doesn't want me on the show. But at that time, I had worked with Steve Scrovan at Catch a Rising Star in Princeton. And I loved, Steve was great. And he gave me his number. He's like, "Call me up." So at least he was a friendly face, in the writer's room, somebody I knew. So that's how it started. I came on the show. I had a no name, Ray's like, "You can live with me because the show's probably going to get canceled anyway." And I don't know if you know, did you work with Greg Giraldo at all, or you knew Greg Giraldo?
I never met him. I knew him.
Okay. So Greg Giraldo had a show called Common Law. He was the star. And he and I did a Fletcher gig. You mentioned Fletcher, Anita Fletcher gig. I was the headliner. He was the middle act. I'm not saying that for a bragging way, but we were together in Virginia. And then 2 weeks later, Greg and I were both out in LA. And by November, Greg was already living back in New York. Show on the air. He's the star. Premiered, canceled, already living back in New York. Raymond had a year earlier been fired from News Radio after one day. So his Hollywood experience was go out, get a big paycheck, and then get fired and come back with your tail between your legs. So he was like, "Tom, move out, live with me. I'm not going to move my family out. The show's going to get canceled. So, take the flyer." So that's what we did. We'll be back by the fall. But Ray screwed up and the show became a hit. And so
No, real quick. You told me a story. I have a very good memory, but back when you were on Cooper Talk, I must have been like, God, that was 10 years ago, about something with Ray and you were broke and your car got stuck in a parking garage, or do you remember that story?
Yeah, of course. That story. Yeah, that's a great memory. Okay, so real quickly, this is way before I was Raymond. Ray and I played on his team, softball team, in the outfield. I was the left fielder. He was the center fielder. And while we were out there, Ray's like, "I'm doing Carson." And I go, "Oh, awesome." And again, I was single. He was married. So it's not like we hung out. Ray doesn't drink. Ray doesn't socialize. He had to watch his kids. So we had a completely different lifestyle. So I would get news in the outfield or in the comedy club, and he's like, "I have to do Carson." And kept getting moved. And then this, and then long story short, Steve, I happened to be in Los Angeles when he's doing Carson. And he's like, "Come to the show." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And what's funny, Steve, we take it for granted. How did we do everything without the cell phone? you know, we're media. Okay. So it's relevant to the story, but he goes, come to Carson. I go, okay. So the night before Carson, we meet up, me, Rory Rosegarten, his manager, and Mike Rowe, not the host of the shows, but comedian Mike Rowe, stand-up comedian Mike Rowe, a very funny guy, wrote Futurama and just funny guy. So we're all there, and I think we go to out and whatever, and then we go, let's go back and watch Johnny say tomorrow night, comedian Ray Romano. Oh my God, you can't get more famous than that. Johnny Carson has said your name. So we wait till 12:30. He says it tomorrow night. You'll comedian Ray Romano. Okay. Wow. So then, okay. Good night. Good night. And at this point, I know you better. I know you, Steve Cooper, better than I knew Ray at this point. Okay. So it's not like, so I leave. Good night. Okay. See you later. I get back to my parking garage and it is locked for the night. There are no cell phones and I have no money. So I run back to the hotel on the Sunset Strip and I get to the front desk. I go, can you call Ray Romano's room, please? And so, hey, Ray, what's up? I can't leave. Like I have no place to stay. It's funny because we now think of it. It's like, well, why didn't you just call Uber? It's like, because it was invented 26 years later. And so he goes, yeah, you can stay in my room. Okay. And I thought, man, this guy's doing Carson, the pivot, the pinnacle of stand-up comedy experience. And he has this schmuck sleeping on his floor. And so I set my alarm, my little Armatron watch for, 5:55 a.m. so I could sneak out. And I did that. And the next day when Ray did Carson, where I was in the audience, then that next day he goes, why did you leave so early? And now knowing him after we lived together, he could care less. I was projecting all this stuff onto him. Like he's going to be like, I got to focus. I can't have this guy. I'm not going to be able to sleep, all this stuff. So yes, great memory, Steve. And that's, that was a bonding moment though. Also watching his first Carson. And usually Carson changes your life. You get a development deal. And for Ray, nothing changed. No deal. Back to doing stand-up, grinding.
It's crazy how it works. And with Ray, Ray has developed into such an amazing actor. That's the thing. Like he went from beyond the sitcom. I mean, it's dramas and stuff like that. Now, with Everyone Loves Raymond, so when did you know you were getting picked up after the first season? And when did you go from being the guy making 3 weeks a month,
out of
$400? When did you start going up into being one of those big shot producer guys?
Yeah. And it's funny, by the way, for people who watch, and if you want a lot of inside information, it's funny because I'm around a lot of younger guys who are doing YouTube, and I might as well be saying, when I was with the Benny Goodman band, it's like, but people who are fans of Rose Raymond, I run a site called Everybody Loves Raymond 360. And it's basically I'm also a photographer, as you mentioned. And we published a book using my photos, but I have 30,000 behind the scene photos to share. On that forum, people are like, what does a producer do? Why are there so many producers? So I'm just, the little side note is every title is the same, doing the same thing within reason. Supervising producer, co-producer, co-executive producer, executive producer, there's story editor, all these things. For writers, it's just pay scale. So a story editor, a producer, a supervising producer, you're still in the writer's room doing the same thing you did when you were a staff writer. There's some other producers who are non-writing producers, but for the most part, those confusing titles, everybody, it's within reason. I can point and go, writer, 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 writer. And you go, but that's a supervising producer. He's just a writer. It's just his agent negotiated more money. So what happened is at the end of first year, Ray and I wrote the season 1 finale. And once I was in the writer's room, which took a little while to go in to actually be accepted into the writer's room, I was coming up with a lot of jokes for Ray. And I learned very quickly, don't just say, I don't like this joke on page 6, because they'd all go, okay, funny man, what do you have instead? Don't just stop us. Like, you better help us. And so I would come up with a lot of jokes for Ray, but then Ray and I had to write the season 1 finale. And it was the first script we wrote. It's called Why Are We Here? And it took us forever to write it. And Ray and I had the utmost respect for the writers after that, because until you've written a script, it's quite the experience. Because from the outside, it's like, I could write this. Yeah, something happens, something else happens, a couple funny things. I'm out. Where's my paycheck? Where's my Porsche? And so Ray and I, after writing that first season finale, really bonded much more with the writers. And at that point, it was just a slow, usually there were like, I was the only guy there from the beginning who was raised person. But Phil had his core writers, and there were probably 6 who were there from the beginning to the end. And then a few came and went, but as long as you were at least decent and funny, you couldn't hide in the room. You couldn't not be funny in a writer's room. So you would just progress is the bottom line. So, in Hollywood is also a weird thing in that it's different than the normal world. So in other words, if you are like, hey, I see you had a crack problem and you were homeless the other day, but you have a great idea for a show. We're going to make you the co-EP on this show. It's like no other industry, in the law industry or finance, like you have a 3-month gap in employment. Can you explain that? It's like, I was taking time for myself.
Well, what I always say too, the people don't get this in Hollywood is, and I did some hand modeling. I was in Westworld and I was NCIS and I would do a little background work here or there. And it's in Hollywood, they're the only person that can sit there and go, we need a fat Black woman, or we need a bald man who looks Jewish. I did a thing for one of was it the Emmys, the Grammys? It was like, they said, we need bald Jewish looking men to wear suits and jump out of a limo to make fun of Larry David. So there we are. We're in like Studio City or whatever, not Studio Century, whatever, Sony Lots or whatever, where they were shooting it. And there's like 12 of us, and we're bald, and I'm not Jewish, but I look Jewish. And there's Jewish people, and we're all sitting there, and I think they said because there's a problem with diversification, and they put one African American in just to say we can do this. And we all got in the limo, and then we pulled up, and then we all jumped out like onto the red carpet. But the thing is, they could say that. They could say, hey, you know what? We need someone who looks like a crackhead. Well, if you said that in any other job, yeah, we want someone to hire. And then they'll sit there and they go, like when they would do the 50s and 60s show, they would say, we need people bald, but not completely bald. Because back then, guys grew their hair on the side. So you're right, Hollywood, it just changes. They can be the most, they can just say, this is what we need. We don't care. We're going to offend you. We don't care. We need a fat fuck. And then that's just say that, and then people show up. Oh yeah, here I am. Because I actually got cast in a Calvin Harris video as creepy guy. Now it's not as bad because there was a creepier guy, but they just my agent called me. We need a creepy guy. Well, thanks, thanks for my ego. But it's right. Like they can go from, that's what's weird about Hollywood that people don't get. They see the glitz and glamour, but it's an insane industry.
Yeah. And I'm talking even from the production, look, one of our writer's assistants, he quit the show. He quit Ever's Raymond. And we're like, okay, well, we liked him a lot, but good luck out there, And then he created Suits. So he did okay. But it's just whatever. If you have a good idea, you can explode in Hollywood versus, the normal world where they keep as long as you're producing, they're happy.
So you started with Ray from the beginning, and you moved up from making $400 a week, and then you got to the job. And then now tell me towards the end, what was it like? Take me to Emmy night, the night you won, because I don't think any of you guys thought you were going to win that night. I mean, because you lost a few years. So tell me about winning the Emmy. What was that like?
Yeah. Well,
what was your expectation?
Going back to, earlier asked a question, when did we get picked up? There was a pivotal moment, and this relates to the Emmys. There was a pivotal moment at the end of season 1 where they put our show from Friday night where we were 83 in the ratings at the end of season 1. We did not seem like we were going to get picked up. We thought we were going to get canceled. I had a friend who worked at Sony, and she was in on a meeting in like December, and they were going through the ratings, and she said, Tom, I'm sorry to tell you, but they're like, okay, it was Raymond, that'll be canceled, cancel. And then she's telling me this. I'm like, okay. So we had terrible ratings, but they moved us from Friday night till Monday night. And in the ratings race, you can't hammock, it's called, going from low ratings. Going from high ratings, and then your show dips and then it goes up, meaning they liked the show before you, they didn't like your show, and now they're back to enjoying whatever's after you. So our first night trying, the line producer came in with the ratings, and we went up from our lead in. So we're like, okay, we're in good shape. At that point, we were picked up the end of season 1, but we were completely ignored by the Emmys. There was no nominations, and I think there might have been no nominations season 1. Maybe Peter Boyle season 2 was nominated because, Peter was a big star. And so it was bleak for the Emmys, very bleak. We're like, we're never going to win an Emmy, but we know we're doing a good show, And then Patty Heaton won an Emmy for acting. And we were like, holy moly. That we were so excited for her because it was like, we're recognized by the Emmys. Somebody even knows that the show's on the air. So then ultimately season, let me think now, 7, I believe. Here, I'll describe the Emmys. You get dressed up. You cannot wait to go. When you're nominated, it's a thrill. Then the room fills up with losers because as the night goes on, 5 out of 6 people have lost. And so it's and for the best comedy and best drama, you are waiting till the very end of the night to get the award. So you have excitement. And then every year we lost. Okay. We're just never going to win. And I want to say Frasier was on then, and Frasier was just the darling, David Hyde Pierce and the show Frasier and Kelsey Gray. They were just like, okay, Everett Raymond, like, well, don't even show up. You don't have to get dressed. Don't come out. And so we, season 7, I believe it was, when I think almost everyone in the cast won, and then the show won. And when they call your name, the name of the show, of course, you're just like, well, this is awesome and unexpected. And, you get on stage there, and first of all, it's lightning fast. You have to run up there. As soon as you get up there, they're saying, there's a big sign in back that says, wrap it up. It's literally, you wish you knew this, Steve. You wish when you were getting dressed before you went out that you were going to win that night because you would feel so happy. It's kind of like when you watch a highlight game of, are you a baseball fan at all?
Phillies fan.
Okay. So not professional baseball, not professional baseball.
What are you, a Mets fan?
Yeah, I'm a Mets fan.
You a Mets fan?
Yeah. Oh, maybe I should have waited till we're done with the interview before I said that. So anyway, it's kind of like, and I hate this. If I know that the Phillies are going to win big and I'm watching the highlight game against the Mets, and it's like all the joy at the beginning where the Mets, I'm like, the Mets got this in the bag, but I know that they're going to lose. You know what I mean? I know like Philly's going to pull it out at the end, and I'm not enjoying this at all. It's like you wish it's the opposite when I know the Mets are going to beat the Phillies. And I'm like, oh, I can't. Go ahead, celebrate, Philly. Go celebrate your heart out because I know we're going to win. So with the Emmys, you're just sitting there dreading, expecting to lose. And so we won in the final season of Everett Raymond. Desperate Housewives was such a juggernaut that we knew they were going to win the Emmy because everybody said they're moving. Like it was such, and I don't know if people remember that, but it was such a phenomenon, Desperate Housewives. And so we went to the Emmys going, well, we're not going to win. And we won. And no one was more shocked than us. And so it was the show was over. The show had ended in January. It was last time we filmed, and now we're in September. So we got to see everybody again, and it was a great, great feeling. And also, as good as Desperate Housewives was, it wasn't a straight comedy. And we were like, what is it doing in this category, And thank God the voters, saw it hopefully our way. But go ahead.
So I was going to say, when you win, like, okay, so you win the Emmy. What do you do with the Emmy? Because you have to go out and party, I guess. I mean, do you walk around the Emmy? I mean, what do you do? Because it's like, you just won an Emmy. You're like, I won an Emmy. Do you walk around and go to people? I won an Emmy. I mean, what happens?
Well, not in a pompous way like that, but what happened is you win the Emmy, you're on stage, and then you walk off, they usher you off stage, and then they grab the Emmy back from whoever, like Phil Rosenthal probably had the Emmy, and Tucker Cawley won for writing. So he wrote the Baggage episode. But when you're walking off, they go, let me have that Emmy. And Tucker even tells the funny story where he goes, did they make a mistake? Like but that's the trophy handout on camera Emmy. Then you go backstage and there's a table, and you literally, what's your name? Tom Caltabino. Okay, here, sign here. Here's your Emmy. Be on your way. And then you go to something called the Governor's Ball. The Governor's Ball is a big, right next to the event, a big dining thing, and whoever won has an Emmy on their table. Then there's an after party, and we were produced by HBO, Worldwide Pants, Letterman's Company, and CBS. So HBO had a big party. You bring your Emmy. So everybody's there with their Emmy at the party, walking around. Yes, you think, wow, I'm going to seem like a schmuck holding my Emmy, but everybody who won has their Emmy. So your whole night, you're there with the Emmy. Then at the end of the night, and you can, by the way, now, Steve, if you came out and I gave you my Emmy, I have 2 Emmys. If I gave you my Emmy, you could go to any party that night of the Emmys. You just show your Emmy. You can't dress like you're a Phillies fan, but you can dress in a tuxedo and go in there anywhere. Anyway, with the thing. But then weeks later, they send you a collar that goes around the Emmy that says your name because they don't know it the night of. So you disassemble the Emmy, you pull the bottom off, you put this black collar on, and now you have your Emmy.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I want to talk real quick about your relationship with Ray. And you guys did that documentary.
95 Miles to Go. Yeah.
What was that about? Because last time I think I talked to you, you were just doing that, or what? Because he did stand up and then you were opening for him, right?
Yes, we did. By the way, let me see if this will come up here. I know some people who might pretend to be listening aren't seeing this, but here, so there's Steve Scrovan, there's Aaron Shore, writer. Okay, I'm holding up people, Tucker Cawley, Leslie County, Phil Rosenthal. I'm in back there, Mike Royce, Jeremy Stevens, and Lou Schneider. So that's us. Yeah, that's backstage after winning the Emmy, the writers, which nobody cares about the writers. We did a stand-up tour from Miami, Florida to Atlanta, Georgia, and Ray doesn't like to fly, so we drove the whole way. So I convinced him to do a documentary about it. He hated that idea. We filmed every moment. We cut it together. We sold it to HBO. It ran on HBO for 3 years, 4 years, or something like that. And it was just a good exercise. It was this. We had 130 hours, and we had to narrow it down to 79 minutes. And that is an exercise in focus, to sit there. And what we did is I became friends with the guys that did Seinfeld's documentary called Comedian. And they said, here's all the mistakes we made. Learn from our mistakes. And he said, the big thing to do is screen it for as many strangers as possible, as often as possible. And so that's what Ray and I did. We screened it at theaters and they didn't know we were there. And so if they didn't laugh, it cut, get rid of everything. Forget your ego. Forget. Steve Cooper thought it was really funny. I want to leave it in. It's like 200 strangers just said, this isn't funny. So you get rid of it. And so we really screen. I mean, it's a great learning experience, and you have to detach your ego from the process. The best advice I got was from one of our writers, Jeremy Stevens, who's like, cut it down to 30 minutes and then add stuff back. It's like, don't think that, oh my God, this is so precious and this is so precious. It's a very humbling thing. Here, I will tell you this. This is a funny story told to me. Seinfeld's producer said, here's what happened to us. We finished Comedian. Jerry was pretty confident and had unlimited money, and he didn't want to test screen it. They sold it to Miramax, and Miramax said, can we please test screen it? And they said, no, we're not going to test screen it. I'm Jerry Seinfeld. We don't need to test it. They finally convinced him to test it. 300 people in New Jersey, 10% of the audience walks out. And one of the comment cards is, you think that's entertainment? Give me $10 and I'll kick you in the balls. So they have to go in and cut out 30 minutes and add in stand-up and make it more of an entertaining movie. And so they learned from that. That's what the guy's saying. Let a neutral audience. Don't show it to 8 of Ray's friends. Let a group of people tell you when you're sitting in the back of the room it's a screening process. And look, Steve, you all want to think like, as a genius and a brilliant person, I'm not going to let some schmuck from New Jersey or 300 tell them what's funny. Tell me what's funny. That's BS. I know comedy, but it's you can't. They're the audience. They are the most neutral palette.
No. Do you still do stand up?
I do. I had to open for, I say I had to. I, I'm busy running this entire company. Our global entry is called the Bop Stars. We are this group of Muppets. I'm going to use Muppets because people relate right away. And so I'm full time in that. And, we have a great investor, a gentleman named Barry Tatelman, who helped make it possible to make a PBS series. Hello, hi, how are you on PBS? You can, it's on pbs.org. But Ray will be like, can you open for me at a casino? Okay. So then I have to do, 20 minutes for 1,200 people. So really doing stand-up, it sounds pompous, but it's very easy once you've done it a million times. But, if you're not writing all the time and, the guys that are super out there on the trenches, doing 9 shows a week, that's doing stand-up. You know what I mean? Like that's where your work, you workshop material and you're like, okay, I have a new minute. You're like, oh my gosh, I got a whole new minute. You're so excited. My stale, terrible act is going to be revived because I have one new joke. And that's doing stand-up. You don't sit there and go, let me write 30 new minutes. You slowly add, but it's by doing it. So yeah, I mean, Ray, can you open for me and Dana Carvey in Vegas? Yeah. What's 1,200 seats? Okay. Yeah. I'm tossing it off, but it's funny because when you're starting off, you'd be like, I opened for Ray Romano. What does that mean? I was in the club when Ray Romano guest spotted, and now I'm like the opposite. I'm like, yeah, I worked with them, but not really. I mean, yes, I was on the show. There's only 3 of us, but to be really, you're in the trenches all the time. Writing is really stand up. So yes.
This has been great. Now, just tell me a little more about Mr. Clown and the show. Where can we find it? What is your goal for it?
The goal is really to try and make a show that, we've made it. We made 10 26-minute episodes of Hello, Hi, How Are You? Teaching children. It's interspersed with music. I should say the guy that's doing the music for us did the music for Everly Raymond, Rick Murata, who's a monster session drummer who played on, Steely Dan and a very hip guy who should not be doing children's programming, but he's unbelievably been the most supportive person in the entire project because he recognized something in it. So the goal for us is to teach kindergarten, first grade, kids the basics of sight words, et cetera, and really have them feel that it's a safe place for creativity for them to. And the biggest thing that we keep pushing is making mistakes. Mr. Clown, nobody makes more mistakes than Mr. Clown. He has belligerent enthusiasm and he's always wrong. And so we're constantly pushing that in of, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. And so we're just trying to make the most creative environment to learn and, have kids. I'm skipping over the music aspect because music is a huge portion of what we do and what kids relate to, So the goal is to build this trusted entity that, teachers and parents can turn to. And sorry, I'm leaving out one element and not want to shut off the video because they can't stand it. So there's some children's entertainment where you're going, really? It's like, does it have to be this cloyingly terrible? Look, sorry, Steve, I'll tell you this one quick, because since I've seen you, this happened. My friend who worked for Google, who originally said, I think you can go bigger than just Ray's living room with this clown puppet. He said, come to Korea with me. I'm speaking at a venture capital thing, and who knows? So we go there and we meet a girl and she's like, oh, we're doing this thing. And my friend kind of blows her off because he's a guest speaker. He's not a venture capitalist who's trying to write checks. So another guy there says, hey, Tom, this girl's doing children's entertainment stuff. Okay. What are you doing? Well, we're doing these songs. Oh, okay. I'll make a puppet version if you want of your character. Okay, great. So we make the puppet version and she's like, hey, our big song is, have you ever seen my tail? And I'm like, okay, we can do that video. And she goes, we have another song too. We do that video. So one of her videos is called Baby Shark. And so that video becomes the most watched video in the history of YouTube. It now has, 18 billion views. It became, from the time I met her, she was working there. She's now the CEO of Pink Fong USA. Okay. Their trajectory And we did sure enough, we did a video with Mr. Clown and Pink Fong, which has only like 80 million views, I think, which is not bad. But their song went from obscurity, it was their number 2 song, to the most watched video in the history of YouTube. And they have 300 employees now. And so it's like, and I've seen it. I've seen it from the smallest start to all of a sudden it starts to take off. The idea, though, they don't do education, and I've written a lot of scripts for them for animation. They don't do education. They said, we're not going to do any education. We want to do education in addition to be entertaining. But we've seen that trajectory. Have you seen?
That's amazing.
Have you heard the Baby Shark song? Because you'd be the only one.
God, yeah. I mean, I mean, it's funny. This is how big that song was. Ted Lasso used that with the guy Jamie Tart, and they go Jamie when he scored it. So yeah, it's everywhere. I had nieces and nephews listen to it, and it's funny.
The Washington Nationals used it as their theme song when they won the World Series, and so
it's everywhere. Yeah, it's amazing,
and it's a public domain song, by the way. It's an old camp song. It's not even their original song, but they had one hit video change the entire complexion. Steve, we've been on for 2.5, 3 hours now, right? Oh no, this is are we raising money for a telethon? Yeah. I'm kidding. I can stay on all day.
No, what? Now I want to know. Well, we got to wrap up soon. Where can people find? You go to pbs.org. Tell people how they can find the show.
Yeah, pbs.org. Hello, hi, how are you? If you literally search pbs.org anywhere in the world, hello, hi. So we did it with a local PBS station here, KLCS, and then it got a few months after it premiered here. It's now on their just pbs.org. So anywhere you type that in, you type in hello, hi, you'll see a colorful Tommy the Tomato and Mr. Clown. And, Allison Janney plays Misinformation, who has to make sure, and there's a puppet version of her. And then Raymond reads, Phil Rosenthal's constantly trying to have a bite to eat. And Mr. Clown pops in unannounced and doesn't like the idea of what Phil's about to eat. And Phil has to convince him to try it. So there's a lot of different elements. It's 26 minutes. Any 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, and any parent will totally enjoy it. So yes. And then we have an educational thing, and then Mr. Clown will visit your classroom. We just became an official ambassador to a school in the Philippines because we were visiting their classroom. So and then just we have a nonprofit also called Mr. Clown and Friends adjacent to it. So I think I'll send you a link, but I don't want to bore the people with all those places. And then Everyone's Raymond 360 on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, I got one final question for you. I always ask this to my guests. You've had a very successul career. You've done a lot of different things: photography, comedy. Everyone Loves Raymond. The Last Laugh at Brown Thompson. You drank Anchor Steam. What are some things when you look back on your career that you're proud of?
By the way, I think I know that I know it's when you see somebody promoting a movie, you're like, this last movie I did, this slasher movie I did with Marlon Brando, where he was, the kids thing is bringing me tremendous fulfillment because I see the faces of these 6 years old. Of course, Everyone's Raymond, the one thing that you touched upon looking at the sitcom schedule, I don't see any sitcoms coming down the pike doing 200 episodes. I don't see, when you and I were kids, there were so many episodes, so many great sitcoms in the future, right? We didn't know that Seinfeld was coming down the pike or MASH was already on the air, but any good sitcom, Friends, anything. And now you mentioned Ted Lasso. What was it? 30 episodes, 33 episodes? We did that.
It was I think it was 50. I think it was 5 seasons, but it was nothing. It's those short seasons to it. Like, when you're with Raymond, it was 23 episodes. It was 23 episodes or 26, whatever it was a season.
Yeah. Let me see. Alexa, how many episodes of Ted Lasso were filmed?
Ted Lasso has 32
episodes. 32 episodes.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I hope I didn't trigger anybody listening. But my whole point is
my last probably.
Ted Lasso is a phenomenal show. But I'm just saying, I don't see anything running like Friends did coming down the pike. And so there's this weird thing. And I noticed with Evers Raymond, where I talk about it every week live. I have a live thing on Sundays. And at the first time I did it, I go, how much am I going to talk about the show? You know what I mean? Like, how much really? You know, what's your favorite episode? And 4 other questions, I'm done. It's 5 years later, and the questions are, the interest in I Love Lucy is astronomical. And I think there's a psychological thing of comfort of and I don't know, Steve, you know, you're different because you're in the business. So you're not sitting there going, let me escape my terrible office job and escape with a sitcom, you know, but people do. They're familiar with these characters. And so that's why I think people, you know, the interest in Seinfeld is astounding, you know, and it's like, I don't see that going away. I don't see anything replacing it. Coming down the pike, you know? So for me, sorry, going back, Evers Raymond, obviously, because it just brings millions of people's laughter. And then the kids stuff is just pure, you know, it's making up for the bad karma from drinking at the Brown Thompson with you.
Well, there you go. But it was a good beer. I can't believe, and now they're closed. There's no more Anchor Steam. They disbanded in 2023. Crazy.
By the way, let's frame that a little. When we were doing stand-up back then, so now people are like, well, why didn't you just have another craft beer? There was no, we were living in a time when it was just basic beers. And so I said to Steve, you got to try this beer. So now you'd be like, well, why not this IPA? Why not this hop? Why not? But it's like, here, can I tell you this story I find very entertaining? If you guys go on YouTube and watch What's My Line, you can go watch What's My Line going back to 1951. And there's an episode around 1962, 63, and the guest signs in, okay? Because they had Lucille Ball, they had Steve McQueen, they had all these crazy high-end actors on What's My Line. And it was the beginning of TV till 67 it ran. So 1963, a guy comes in and you're watching and they're writing in the guy's name, and then he sits down and they're going to guess what this guy does. The guy that sits down is Colonel Sanders. So I bring this up because you're watching, Steve Cooper and Tom Caltabino are going, Colonel Sanders. Like, how do they not know it's Colonel Sanders? Because we're endowing with them the knowledge that we have now. So when we tell our Anchor Steam beer, the people are imagining a sea of craft beer on the beer. And Tom said, you know, try Anchor Steam. People are like, why Anchor Steam? Like, why not try, you know, Fat Tire Ale or something like that? There was Budweiser, Michelob, Bud. I don't even know if Bud Light was there then, but there was, you know, there were 6 beers.
And there was Anchor Steam. And I wish it was still around because I would get a 6-pack this weekend. But
it was phenomenal.
Anyway, it's awesome. I want to thank you for coming on, Tom. This is great. People, look up Tom Caltabino. Look up his. He has a great. Didn't even get to his photography. He has a great book he published. He did take my picture. I still use that picture on my Cooper Talk logo and my LinkedIn. It's me with a microphone, and everyone's like, "That's such a great picture." I go, "Yeah, the guy who did it, you know." He worked there. He won an Emmy, and they're like, "Well, I got an Emmy winner," and he has a book of photography. Took 30,000 pictures of everyone else.
Here, let me do this.
You get your okay.
Here we go. Yeah. Oh, I see. Oh, my eye line is wrong. Oh, that's so weird. Hold on. Hold on, everybody. What I'm doing is I'm loading the camera.
I tell him, I go, you go to that headshot person. I'll go to a guy who's won Emmys.
Yeah, I get Emmy winners to take my shot, pal.
Exactly. Anyway,
yeah, that was a great moment. Yeah. Sorry, Steve, I love that because you were right up on the computer. You had a good look. You're right up on the microphone, and I was right next to you. And I'm like, let me just.
It's great. And there's one serious one like this, and then there's one like this, and it's great. And so pbs.org, they can find it there, right?
Hello, hi, how are you? Hello, hi, how are you? pbs.org, just type that in. Everyone's Raymond 360. There's a Paley Center exhibit. I don't know when this is going to air, but Paley Center exhibit, June 16th opens, June 13th it opens, and it runs the entire summer. And you can see my photography in New York City, the Paley Museum, which is in the mid-50s. It'll be filled with my photography and a bunch of other important artifacts. You can hold an Emmy up and take a picture and stuff like that. So that I think we've covered 40% of the bases, like the Phillies.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever. The Phillies, baby. People. So please check out Tom. Check out me. You can actually you can go to coopertalk.net, my other podcast. I have 1,040 episodes, and I'm about to post. This was crack me up. I posted. I'm going to be posting an interview with Robin Campbell, who is one of the founding members of UB40. And no lie, as we were talking, it was 4:30 my time. It was 9:30 his time. He did have a glass of red wine, and that's not a joke. He held it up, and I went, "Oh my god!" Also, go to
how red was
YouTube,
it?
The Coop. It was great. It was red wine. It was red. Go to YouTube, find the Coop Tank. That's my business podcast. I have 3 local business people. We talk about motivation. We talk about networking, all good stuff biz. Once again, follow Coop's Comedy Corner. Shout out to Jimmy Corhan. Jimmy Corhan is my producer, who heads up Comedy Trainwreck, which besides my show has Cancel Culture with John Cancel and the Legendary Wid. It has Talking Shit with Coleman Green. He has a dating show. He has a guy who's a handyman. There's a bunch of stuff. So please follow Comedy Trainwreck. And also on Wednesday, May 28th at the Soundplex Studios, I'll be hosting Cork's Comedy and Connections. It's wine tasting with networking. And then myself and Chris Kosher will be performing. And then the next night at Death of the Fox Brewing Company, it's a beer barrel full of laughs. It's a new show I'm producing. I'll be hosting it with Jay Black, the very funny Jay Black, doing his only area appearance. So please check me out, check Tom out, check Comedy Trainwreck out. Everyone, you have a great night, and I'll talk to you soon.
Coop's Comedy Corner. Comedy Train.